Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement, where we make procurement rock and roll. As always, I've got Natasha and Conrad with me. Natasha, formerly IBM, McKesson, Salesforce, Nike, and now the CEO and founder of Candid Procurement, enabling transformation results for some of the world's top procurement teams. We've got Conrad, our in-house innovator from Intel to Adobe, now the founder and CEO of one of the hottest procurement startups, Graphite. It's great to see you guys again. Yeah, and I think we're going to pick up our conversation from last time, which was around ethics, right? So for our audience, you might have noticed us like bounced around a little bit, touching on different concepts. So I think today we're going to probably narrow it down a little bit and focus maybe a bit more on the negotiation side, right? And what's an ethical negotiation? And I think it's an area where probably we don't have the same points of view. 100%, right? I think last time we were discussing like, when is it okay to lie? Is it ever okay to lie? Can you have a white lie? Can you bluff in a negotiation, etc.? I don't know. What's your views, guys? What is an ethical? When you walk out of a negotiation, what makes you feel good, right?
Eating their lunch, taking home a whole bunch of savings.
Ethically.
Well, you're bringing up like bluffing and white lies and everything else, and I'm listening to that, and I'm like, what is the difference between a bluff and a lie? Like, where do you draw the line and say, like, this is honest or this isn't honest? Like, it's complicated.
So I'm okay with bluffing. Just gonna put that out there in a negotiation. I've done it before. I don't think it hurts. I do feel like negotiations that I go into, especially when it's a transactional style and it's not a collaborative, long-term partnership type of negotiation, I expect the other side to be bluffing as well. Isn't that like what most people think when they say negotiation? Not most negotiations.
I think most people trying to prepare and have like data points that would not necessarily not necessarily bluffing. Like, be careful with bluff, because at some point one of the sides, at least once in your professional career, will call you on that, and you have, like, if you said that I have plan B, I can walk away. Okay, one day you will be put in a position when you will have to walk away, or to say like, now we'll take your offer, right? So like, be careful with bluffing, because if you bluff, you want to make sure that you can stand by, right?
So if I have a plan B, it's okay to bluff.
Well, it depends what bluff, right? So for example, you're negotiating with someone, you don't have any other price points. Like, you can't find comparison. You're not going through RFP. You don't have offers from others, and you're getting price of $10.13. And for some reason you need it to be 9, right? Maybe because of your budget constraints, maybe because it's just your sports interest to have it lower than was offered. And if you're saying that I have someone who can give it to me for $8.50, and the supplier tells you then go with them, what are you going to do then?
I'm going to say, okay. And then the next day I'm going to call them and say, hey, my guy fell through. So 10 it is.
Well, that's a colossal waste of time.
Yeah, no.
I'll tell you that, like, when I wrapped my corporate career after 25 years, I made a careful calculation of how much money I spent to all the organizations that I worked for. And the number came to 17 billion altogether, cumulative savings that my teams have generated over 25 years of my career. And so obviously I've been through a number of situations where I had to take tough stand, maybe bluff, maybe make up some numbers. Do I recall any situations when I felt as like, that was not ethical? I crossed the line that if the other side finds out, then I will be in moral troubles, ethical troubles with any laws or regulations, or that they would just look at me and they would just say that, Natasha, that was borderline, like, partnering, right? I don't recall those situations. And to me, that, like, and I know that I have a high gradation, and I have my values. I respect them deeply, and they're important to me. And I think that we just have to be reminded every day that 10 years from now, will I be proud that I saved $17 billion? Probably not, but I will continue carrying with pride the relationships that I've built with suppliers, with my teammates, with my stakeholders, while doing the right things for the company. It's kind of like doing well by doing good.
That's so interesting, because who's the one who judges this? Like you said, Natasha, a lot of it's based on your own values, and I think that's important. But if you engage in an act of deception, or you say you lie in a negotiation, or someone does that, but no one's wiser because of it. Like, nobody actually knows that you lied or you deceived them, or and you sort of maintain the relationship. You're not, personally, me, I'm not going to feel good about coming out of a negotiation like that. But I'm just highlighting the point that I guess it really depends on the person, really, to decide and make up their mind whether or not they think what they did was ethical or not. Like, there's not really an objective. Maybe there is an objective way. I mean, because these are. I think these unite us. Like, don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal. These are very, like, normal principles to have. It's just the degree to which you apply it and how you apply it. I think people can have different interpretations depending on their background and culture.
So Zach, you're bringing up, like, who's the wiser or whatever. I'm thinking, in this process that we go through when we're negotiating, we are representing, like, a couple of different things, right? We're almost always negotiating on behalf of a business partner, like for marketing or finance or manufacturing, so, like, somebody, right? We're doing a deal like an agent for them. So we're representing them, right? So back to the point of, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to walk away. Like having alignment with them would be really helpful. Even in the strategy, they might be on the phone call and they might just throw you under the bus in that moment. Like, baloney, we're not doing that. We're not walking away. So you have the person that you're acting as an agent for, and then you have the broader organization that you're negotiating kind of for, like the company that I work for, and then you have yourself. So you at least have those kind of three individuals or three entities that care about what you do. I think Natasha's saying maybe the one that matters the most to her is kind of herself, looking at the mirror in the morning. And I think that there's a lot of respect in looking at life that way. And I think she's right, on her deathbed or at the end. I mean, we got to feel good about how we went through these processes. But, I agree with you. Like, life is this complicated set of, it's a continuum, like where between, here and here is where you'll stop and say, that it's not okay. Like a really simple, not big deal of a bluff. Like, is that the same thing as a full on, I have another price that's, I can't remember the price. I have another price at $850 or something. Like, I don't have another price at $850, but, like, I don't know exactly where you go from a really simple bluff. Like, we've got to have this price at $850. And if you can't meet $850, we'll find, we'll find a vendor that can. Like, maybe that's true-ish, maybe it's not. Anyway, complicated stuff.
Yeah.
It's complicated stuff, but I would say that there's no simple answer, but there is one thing that it's consistency of our behavior, because we can't be very pure in one area and complete evils in another. If we know that we have like evilish tendencies somewhere else, they will come in other areas as well. Like, in other words, you can't be like the greatest colleague and the most collaborative partner and the most thoughtful leader to someone and then be like a complete asshole during negotiations, right? So I think it's to a large degree what kind of reputation we want to have and what kind of public and professional image is important for us to construct and be viewed by. I don't know, because you're right. There's no ruler, there's no measuring tape that would say, yep, you're within the parameters. Nope, you're outside. There are, as we mentioned in a previous episode, there is code of conduct, there are policies, there are regulations, but at the end of the day, we represent enterprises in the business for money. So we're trying to make commercially well-crafted decisions, but they are sitting not just on negotiation strategy, they're sitting on our human values. And these human values made us professionals, that what we're known for. And, you know, we all have colleagues, and we know that some colleagues have reputation of being caring leaders. Some have reputation of very knowledgeable, strong professionals, and some have reputations like, if you have another choice, then go work for someone else.
It's interesting you're talking about values, because I think that this might be one of the most important practical things to think about here. The organization have value statements. So you may find yourself working in an organization that draws. Ash talked about last week about some of the companies he's worked with and the level of scrutiny because they were in, selling to the federal government or whatever. He had bought some lunch to bring back to an auditor just in an act of kindness, and the auditor couldn't even accept that. In fact, it could be looked at as an effort to, improperly influence the audit that was going on. So the organizations have different levels that they need to comply with, or that they've stated as call it the integrity or the values of the organization. If you find yourself working in an organization that doesn't have great values that align with yours, that's obviously going to be a problem, right? Because the organization would be pushing you to get results, doing things, well, go say this or go do that or whatever that would be out of sync with what you have as your own personal values. But how many of us have actually sat down? I mean, I think we pick a lot of this up, call it character, call it integrity, whatever, as we're growing up. But it's really important to kind of take a moment and sit down and figure out where those lines are for yourself. Because I do think that things will happen, today, tomorrow, this week, this month, that will be chipping away at maybe what you learned from your mom, right? Or what the values that you honor, because it is a bit of a slippery slope where on one end of the continuum, it's like, oh, this is obviously okay with, how I'm okay behaving in life or in business. And so you take one little step in that direction, another step, and another step, and another step. And those first 20 steps might be totally fine, in terms of your own personal values. But if you don't know where those lines are, I suspect most people will find themselves stepping over the lines. And then maybe they don't even know where the line is anymore. They can't find their way back. And then they end up doing, crazy things. My guess is, I saw a lot of people. I've seen it. Not a lot, but I've seen a number of people steal money from the company. I was in charge. Many of you are as well, from a travel and expense perspective. And the little subtle little things that you see people do that gets them into a place where they've obviously crossed the line. And then you see that nobody's watching or nobody cares, or maybe it's okay. And then it often leads to something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time you get to the end of it, I think you look at the person and go, how in the world do you think it's okay to buy your groceries and have the company pay for them? Just kind of expense that stuff, or your coffee every morning on the way to the office, or your gas for your car, or like it just like looking at it, stepping back, you would be like, yeah, that's not really where I wanted to be, but it just kind of started to get there over time. And so anyway, my point is practically it's worth sitting down and figuring out where your lines are and then making sure your lines are in harmony and alignment with the organization that you're working with. And even the people, right? You may have a business partner that's telling you to cross lines, but you need to know, that's, I can't actually do that negotiation like that for you. I don't do that. If you want to go find somebody else to do this, then you can, but that's not how I would do the negotiation. And again, Zach, maybe I'm not saying exactly where that is in any of those situations. I wouldn't begin to tell you, Zach, this bluffing that you're doing is inappropriate. I don't think, I mean, if you're on the far end of the continuum and you're just a full on bullshitter, like you're going to lose your reputation. And I will, I'll be happy to tell you that. I mean, we're friends because I trust and respect you. I don't think you're that kind of a person, but I think we need to know that.
I hope not. It's interesting because I'm listening to this. I'm thinking I've been in loads of negotiations, as of both of you, but often I'm wearing different hats depending on the negotiation and the context, right? I mean, Conrad, you talked about representing the business. I've had stakeholders who tell me, get as much as you can out of this supplier. Just go in there, be firm, be hard. I've had suppliers walk in, right? And some of them like are big physical stature and like have a presence and just stare me in the eyes, right at the beginning of a negotiation, like they're about to come and bite my head off, right? So I'm not going to sit across from them in the table and just, be like, oh, let's get along. And, because they're there expecting a bit of a tussle or a negotiation. So I'm always adapting, I guess, depending on the context. I think there is that point around having personal ethics and having lines that you just don't cross. And I completely agree with that. And especially when it comes to the other person sitting across you from the table, always having that awareness of that this is a real person and that you need to, be emotionally intelligent, right, in the discussion, right? But in the back of my head, I'm always thinking like, yeah, I need to respect this person as a human, as a person, but I'm out to get the best deal from his or her business or company, right, for this business. So I'm constantly adapting, and also brought about one other thought, which is so like game theory when you explain it like that, right? Because if you have a strategy of I'm always honest and I don't play games, etc. If somebody else does play games, then they're gonna obviously pull on over your eyes, right? Because they're playing a little bit dirtier. And so I guess maybe one question is, if the supplier is playing dirty, what do you do in that case? And if you don't have a lot of choice and time to move suppliers, etc., like at that point, is it okay to push back or to engage them at their level? Always, while I think we're agreeing there is a line, there are lines that just don't get crossed, right? I mean, does that resonate?
If someone's playing dirty, you call them on that, and but you don't get down to their level. You just call them on that, and then you say that you have to reset your approach. And I think that we're talking a lot about negotiations, but ethical or unethical dilemmas are happening every day 25 times. I'll give you a couple of real life, real time examples, because I am sitting for a couple of weeks on the client side, and during the live interaction, I learned that the chief of staff's birthday is this weekend. She's flying to celebrate it with her family in another state. She'll be back on Monday. And through previous conversation, we learned that we're sharing the love for bubbles, especially for rosé bubbles. And as a lover of rosé bubbles, I have a collection of it at home. And I'm just thinking like, oh, I'm going to bring her a bottle on Monday. When she comes back, it will be a nice surprise to her. And then I'm like, no, I can't. She's not my colleague. She's my customer. And then I'm like, well, I can because I'm not selling the business anymore. I am delivering. So it will not be viewed as I am buying any favors. And then I'm like, no, it will be because she's a chief of staff. She has direct access to the CEO. And I've been having this dilemma in my head for the last 24 hours. It's a simple thing. It probably, this bottle of rosé bubbles will fit even in their gift acceptance amount, $25, $30. It's not, but because it's a personal gesture, and I'm thinking, should I do it from Natasha to that person, or should I do it from candid procurement to that person? What is better? What is worse? So if you're going through this way of thinking, it means that you are trying to find an ethical way to do something that you are inclined to do. And maybe this is one of the ways how you measure what's ethical, what's not. It's kind of like, if you give yourself a moment to think that that's how I want to approach, this is how I'm planning to approach this dilemma, am I thinking about it in the most ethical way?
100% agree.
I still haven't decided, but I'm just sharing with you like exactly what's going on through my head right now. And
send the bubbles. Just send the bubbles. Give me a break. Send the bubbles. Like this is such a reflection of the complexity of this, right? I mean, I'm on the sales side, and I found that particularly working with procurement people, they rarely pick up the phone. They don't answer emails. They're tired of getting sold to. Like, you need to do things to stand out and build a relationship. And some people could say, well, you're trying to influence. I'm trying to get their attention. They're not responding to any of these other things. My favorite thing is to send chocolate chip cookies. There's this company out of Utah called Crumble, and they're like all over the country. I can, like, in 30 seconds, I can send a box of cookies to either one of you. It's like, boom, it'll be there in an hour. And it just gets someone's attention. And sure, someone can look at that and, think questionably about it. But I don't know.
Well, your case is a bit different from Natasha, though, because you're doing it presumably for a business interest, right? To get a meeting, or is it you just love giving people cookies?
You could argue that, sure, but I think at the end of the day, like, I think if look at, like, continuum, right? Let's go back to the continuum. I could hire a private investigator to go follow you guys around and see some of you, jaywalking or, cheating on your spouse or doing unethical things yourselves. And I could use that information to manipulate you to a place where you're going to act as my agent and do whatever I tell you to do. Like, that's just like full on darkness and evil, right? On the other side, like, giving people nice human gestures that isn't like, like, I don't know. I just find that these kind of things, like, and it probably is within some sort of a, are they going to put their, are you expecting them to make decisions over a $30 or $40 or $50 bottle of wine or a $30 box of cookies? Like, is that the expectation, and that's what you're trying to do? Like Ashley's lunch for the auditor, like it was perceived as, could be questionable, but it was, I know Ash, definitely he wasn't trying to influence the auditor. He was just trying to do something nice. So somewhere in there is sort of the intent, both of the person that's making the gesture and the person, and then the perceived intent of the person that's receiving the gesture. And, it kind of needs to be okay. But, I would not go to a place where basic human kindness goes away because we're afraid that, this might be manipulation.
I agree with you. But in case with Ash, he was driven by the best intentions. Kudos to him. But on the same time, in the same token, kudos to auditor for not taking the lunch. Because auditors, justice procurement people, they have to be squeaky clean. There should be no hint that they can be influenced anyway, anyhow. And I believe that I can pay for my own sandwich. And that's what I've been doing my whole career. I've seen a lot of instances when people do wrong things and they claim just not knowing. And I always give the first time benefit of the doubt. I worked with a lot of young um, uh, analysts, just people straight from college. And a couple of times I've observed behavior when when I had to explain to them, you cannot put your trip to liquor store on your corporate card. And the answer was that, well, my personal card was maxed out. Like, still not the reason to put your mortgage on a corporate card. The trip to liquor store, buying engagement ring, cashing out in Vegas after you maxed out on your personal, not a good reason. And sometimes people would say like, I am sorry, I've been in a I was in a total bind. That was the only way out. And they compensate everything within 30 days. There's some instances when it's been lingering for 6 months. And I would be the one asking HR to dismiss the person and to just fire a person, saying that this is the wrong behavior. I can't have it in the team. People share their war stories, and sometimes they share what makes them look as the winners, and sometimes what they think that just makes them look cool. And I think we as leaders and we as humans have to always see if people around us, is it lack of knowledge? Then you explain. But if it's a repetitive behavior, then you stop it. And you stop it very in a very kind of like directive way, right? Like you're not sugarcoating and dancing around it, because you're also responsible for spreading ethical practices. And by killing the bad ones, unethical, you helping to build the good spirits within the organization.
But that, Natasha, that is a clear example of crossing ethical lines, right? Like, because I think we've touched on this a few times, especially with corporate cards. I've never had this experience or seen anybody do anything like this, because we just don't use corporate cards as much in the UK in that way, I guess. But I've always think like that's pretty obvious to me that if you're buying an engagement ring, it doesn't matter. You just never, the business card is for the business expenses, so you don't ever put a personal expense on a business card. Maybe the lines are a bit more blurred in some smaller companies and depending on policies they got. But the thing I wanted to touch on is, I think Conrad mentioned it, it's around that perceived risk, right? Because, or perceived intent, because like you said, giving an auditor lunch and the auditor declining is the right thing. And that's not because the intent is pure, but the perceived intent, if a third party stood 10 meters away just watching, what would that person think? Because they don't know the relationship. They don't understand that you're doing it out of the kindness of your heart. So it can look like you're trying to influence an auditor. And so that in and of itself is a reason not to give the auditor a sandwich, for example. Right? Yeah, I think you gotta think about, it's that third party test. Like if there was someone watching me do this, what would they think, right? Regardless of what my intentions are, what would they think my intentions are? And that's maybe where you draw a line.
It strikes me, we started this conversation talking about negotiations, how often I think I personally and others, walk into a negotiation ill-prepared, and we're just kind of shooting from the hip and being reactive without a really strong plan. But if you go into a negotiation with a plan, you've prepared with as much data as you can, with your business partner, you're actually aligned. You know what you're going to ask for. You're anticipating how they're going to respond and how you're going to respond. I would propose that even in that context, in advance, you can be thinking about where these lines are and how you may bluff and how big of a bluff may be acceptable or not in the context of my personal ethics, the needs and wishes of the business stakeholder that I'm representing, and the company values and integrity as well. So that because it's like this slippery slope. In the heat of the moment, what are you going to say? How are you going to respond? It's really, I say you're a lot more risk if you're shooting from the hip in the, those ego moments. You get in this gumption around the whole thing, and pretty soon you're, who knows what's coming out of your mouth and how much vapor and nonsense and, but a really well prepared negotiation, I think can protect you from doing things that you're going to regret later, both from a business success perspective as well as, how you go about doing it and your behaviors.
I wish we had Mark Raffan on because this is talking about negotiation. I'm just thinking like, where are we getting confused with this whole bluff, white lie negotiation? I'm just thinking like, what actually is in the negotiation? It's framing, right? It's about putting a frame on the negotiation or the topic, positioning yourself. And, even if your position isn't that strong, it's all about how you portray yourself in the best possible position. So it's not really necessarily thinking about, oh, how am I going to lie and steal and weasel my way with a better deal here? But it's more a case of like, how do I present myself in the best possible way? And within that, there's maybe a little bit of room for you to, maybe exaggerate a little bit, or I don't know if you guys feel that's successful. And again, I think it really depends on what you're doing. If you're negotiating strategic contract, obviously the open book approach, which we've covered before, and honesty, communication, that's gonna succeed for a long-term relationship versus something that's much more transactional, where the other side is being a little bit, not even a little bit, it could be very difficult sometimes. So I think that's where I'm saying like, it's about how I frame the negotiation and how perception, how the opposite side perceives my position. So I'm not trying to, maybe you can say that's deception. I think you could say that's deception potentially,
Hey, Zach. So first off, I do think this would be a really interesting, I mean, we've had 3 in a row conversations about integrity. I think at our next follow-up with Mark, and I'm sure we'll have one, we all really enjoyed talking to him. I do think we should present this to him. While you're talking, I went to Gemini and I asked, what's the difference between bluffing and lying, and how do you, like, this is, okay, it's AI, so it isn't God's truth and religion and like whatever, but this is what it says. Bluffing is a strategic move that involves exaggerating your position, intention, or alternatives. It's a form of deception that's widely considered to be accepted part of the game of negotiation. For example, a buyer might say, I have other offers for this product and they're much lower than your price, when in fact this is exactly what we're talking about, right? And in fact, they don't have any other offers at all. This statement is about one's bargaining position, not a verifiable fact. A bluffer is also prepared to back down if their bluff is called, which is hilarious. This is what you said in the beginning, right? I'm going to come back tomorrow. And then it says, second bullet here, lying is the act of making a false statement about a material fact with the intent to deceive. Lying crosses an ethical and often legal boundary. An example of a lie is saying, I have approval from my CEO for this deal, when you haven't spoken to them at all. This is a statement of verifiable fact. Well, clearly AI doesn't have maybe a better answer than we're talking about either here, right? Because they're those two definitions are kind of like crossing each other.
Yeah.
Just like everything in, not everything, but very often it's crossing too. That's why I think that because there's no measuring tape and because there's no clear definition, the culture of the business you represent, but most importantly, your reputation that you will carry with you throughout your professional career is your radar. And it's, we're going back to where we started 3 episodes ago. Will you be proud, tell your mother about what you just did?
Yeah.
Right. And, but I have another question for you guys. What should people do when they observe unethical behavior from higher ups? If you're a procurement manager and you see that a CPO is involved in a dirty deal, or CTO, or anyone from the C-suite, and you know that this goes against the company's rules, goes against the ethics. Yes, some companies have anonymous speak up like lines that where you can lodge
whistleblower, like the whistleblower line or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're junior in the workforce, and like, how do you know that what you see that you should act upon it? Like, at which point you question yourself? Maybe I don't know something. Maybe the person is doing it because ultimately it is better for the company.
That's
But
hard.
also, how do you not become a constant complainer when it's like, oh, this person is doing the wrong things, let me file a complaint. Oh, this person is doing the wrong thing, let me lodge a complaint. Then you're becoming just a full-time complainer. So what's your experience? What are your thoughts?
I look, just on this point about, like, especially young graduates and people who just enter the workforce newly, they're going to absorb the culture, especially if it's their first job or first real kind of entry into the corporate world. They will absorb all the bad and the good stuff, right? And so I think it's kind of unfair to ask, like, young grads and stuff to speak up so easily, because I can see they'll be observing and they'll be like, well, if this is how all the senior leaders act, then this is the way the world works. And, and they just start to create this worldview based on what they're experiencing. Whereas those of us who are more experienced can obviously spot easier, I think, and maybe not spot it easier, but have the have the understanding to know when something is wrong. Have the conviction. That's the word. Conviction to say, actually, that behavior is wrong. Whereas someone who's younger might be like, it seems wrong to me, but also I don't know. Right? These people know much more than me. So how do you always call out an unethical behavior? I think that's always the best thing. If you're working for somebody who's unethical, get out of there as fast as you can, because, like you said, Natasha, I think long term that's not going to serve you well. You're not going to pick up the right habits, the right way to work with people, the right EQ behaviors, etc. And I think it's very important for companies to have things like speak up and whistleblower type of hotlines. And I've seen fundamentally how different cultures are when it's kind of whistleblower type of culture and a speak up kind of culture where everything is open and transparent, versus more of a, whatever the boss says goes,
yeah, but let's not confuse. Speak up cultures are not necessarily honest and transparent, because in many speak up cultures, you, like, in 100% cases, you doing it anonymously unless you want to be known. And I have seen the examples of the opposite, when those who are lodging complaints, I would actually consider their behavior unethical, because they would be just on the witch hunt collecting the data points about who does wrong what. So it's a tricky thing.
But were they unknown though, Natasha? Was it anonymous tip-offs that they were? All right, I think maybe that's what the issue is, because for me, speak up and whistleblowing, it's at the senior level, which means you should be able to come out in public, say it, and get the backing from most of the executive, the leadership of wherever you are, against that maybe one individual leader you've raised a concern against. It should definitely be something you say publicly. And I'd say, if you want to stick with your own values and stuff, say it publicly. And if you get backlash, then that's not where you want to be, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the whistleblower processes that are in place are not as public as that sounds. I think your name is known. Like, it's not like you go to anonymous email or like it's like, but you also need to be protected in those situations. I don't think there's a billboard out there that says Conrad says the CEO does such and such. This stuff is really weird, folks. Like, I love what you said, Zach, which is, it's not going to serve you to be in that environment, integrity is being true to what you believe, right? Be true to your values that's my understanding of the definition of integrity. And if your values are out of sync with the organization or the leadership that you're working with, there is some integrity gap inside of you that you need to act on. You need to leave. You need to go do something. And that may lead you to a place where you say, I need to whistleblow, or I need to whatever. So how you leave or how you take action, I think may vary based on the situation. but you need to be true to yourself. You have a personal line, you have personal values, and you're in a place that is out of sync with that. And maybe it's, you might be like, I'm not acting that way, so I don't have an integrity problem, but that incongruity is going to be super painful, and it's just going to be one problem after another. And you're right, like you run the risk of normalizing inside yourself that those other values are okay, and you're the one that needs to change instead of, doing something different in the organization. I just keep personally thinking how important it is to kind of have that, like, actual written down, like, what are my values? How will I act? And then have some sort of an inventory with yourself so you can evaluate, am I being true to, what my, I love the what would my mom think about this, but whatever those measures are, am I being true to that? Am I sticking with it? Or am I just sliding into a place that's more of a cultural, valueless, selfish, or whatever it looks like, right? That kind of pulls us in this direction of being away from our values.
Yeah, I mean, we're all different people. We've got different values. We come from different backgrounds. I think it's as important, Conrad, to, like you said, write it down. Company needs to state what the expectations, what the values are, and it needs to take action on the back of that. So supporting people who speak up, for example, or, having consequences for not doing the right thing. I think the reason it's so important companies need to write it down is because there's so much diversity. So when you're hiring thousands of people, how do you get everyone moving to the same value? Write it down, make sure you live it, make sure you show that you're living it so that people can then say, okay, this is what's expected of me. And maybe that way you get a little bit more alignment. But I think there's always going to be a little bit of variability because of cultural backgrounds and just differences in personality and things that will always, I think, there's a little bit of maybe wiggle room, but yeah, there are also lines, hard lines.
I think the fact that we had 3 conversations on this subject and we keep talking about it just shows you the importance, the significance, and the ambiguity of the subject, even though it may sound as clear, right? It's not. So if any of our listeners and viewers are struggling with any ethical dilemma, we would love to be part of your solution. So reach out to any of us or to all of us. And as you can hear, we're fascinated by this subject.
Absolutely. It's so fascinating. Like it's actually really important because one of those things that you can take something away from straight away. And I think it's really important to keep reflecting on your ethics and stuff. But I think we can leave it there then. Maybe, I don't know if we'll have a fourth, maybe in a few months or something, because it does sound like an endless
let it stew.
topic. Let it stew for a bit. Yeah, let's all watch our ethics and regroup.
I would love for the community to, punch back in the notes or, back to any of us individually, like how you look at this bluffing versus lying thing. Like how like, what is the right way to figure out, well, like where you can draw these lines, and where you're drawing them as individuals? I mean, don't be too concerned about, any sort of harsh judgment from us. You can hear from the 3 of us that this is, on my screen, I'm lined up as Natasha, Conrad, and Zach, and I don't know if that's the continuum here because I love Natasha's bright, shining example of, absolutely not. I think you've said multiple times, you always buy the lunch, you always do, it's really great. And Zach, it sounds like you're more than happy to just bluff me into a corner in any negotiation. So I'm kind of stuck between the 2 of you.
Well, I suggest, I like
not
Kevin
the best place to get stuck. No, not the worst place to get stuck.
Between 2 amazing people, for sure. If I stay between these 2 boundaries, I'll probably be just fine.
All right. Well, thank you everyone
thank you guys. That was awesome.
Listening. And see you in the next episode.
All right. Take care, guys. Thank you.